The spark, the myth, had always sounded seductive, like some forbidden door everyone wanted to believe existed. Humans only use 10% of their brains. Alex Mason had heard the phrase so many times it had become background noise. It showed up in movies, in coffee shop debates, in self-help books with glossy covers. People whispered it with the same reverence they gave to astrology or hidden conspiracies, half joke, half longing. But Alex wasn't just a casual listener. He was a graduate student at Stanford, buried deep in the world of neuroscience. The kind of person who lived off caffeine, lit his apartment with the glow of journal articles, and knew exactly how much of a lie the 10% claim really was. Still, he couldn't help but wonder. It was late one October night when the thought came back to him, sharper than ever. The campus library was nearly empty, the air thick with the smell of paper and worn carpet. His laptop hummed, the cursor blinking over a half-finished draft of his research proposal, applications of neuroplasticity in post-traumatic recovery. His brain was fried. He pushed the chair back and rubbed his eyes. If only I could switch on the other 90%, he muttered. The voice startled him. It was his own, spoken out loud, as if some part of him wanted the universe to hear. That was when the reply came, not from a universe, but from behind him. You already are. Alex turned. A man in a dark jacket leaned against the bookshelf, face half hidden in shadow. His accent was faintly East Coast, the kind that carried a mix of authority and challenge. I'm sorry, do I know you? Alex asked. The stranger stepped closer, revealing a lined face, graying beard, and eyes that carried too many sleepless nights. Dr. Carter Wells, visiting professor. I couldn't help overhearing your wishful thinking. Alex frowned. He'd heard the name. Wells had been a government researcher back in the 90s, rumored to have worked on classified neural interface projects before disappearing into private labs. Look, no offense, but the 10% thing is a myth, Alex said. The brain is active across different regions all the time. MRIs show activity even when we're at rest. It's not like 90% of our neurons are just waiting around, smoking cigarettes. Wells smiled faintly. True, and not true. Alex raised an eyebrow. That's not how science works. Science, Wells said, isn't a fixed monument. It's a river. And sometimes, when you swim far enough upstream, you find tributaries no one else has mapped yet. Alex almost laughed, but something about Wells's tone froze him. It wasn't the arrogance of crank. It was the quiet certainty of someone who had seen too much. All right, Alex said slowly. I'll bite. What do you mean by not true? Wells sat down across from him, lowering his voice. You're right. Every part of the brain has a function. Sensory, motor, language, memory. We use nearly all of it, but not at once. Not at full bandwidth. Alex leaned in. Imagine a supercomputer, Wells continued, running on a generator built for a household toaster. That's the human brain. We've evolved regulators, neural governors, if you will, to prevent overloading, to keep us from burning out. Alex blinked. You're saying we do have and use capacity, but it's locked behind biological safety mechanisms. Exactly. Wells's eyes gleamed. The myth isn't that we only use 10%. It's that we could safely handle more if we found a way to override the limiters. Alex's heart thudded faster than he liked. He told himself it was nonsense, a half-truth spun into science fiction. But another part of him, the part that stayed awake reading about brain-machine interfaces and the latest experiments in neurostimulation, leaned forward like a moth to flame. Suppose you're right, Alex said. Suppose there are governors. Even if we could bypass them, what's the point? Supermemory? Faster problem solving? You'd probably stroke out before you finish your homework. Wells chuckled softly. That's what we thought, too. But then came Project Helix. The name hung in the air like static. Alex had never heard it, yet it resonated with the weight of classified programs he'd only seen hinted at in declassified PDFs. Helix? A DARPA initiative. Neural expansion. For years, We tried invasive methods, electrodes, gene editing, chemical enhancers. But the breakthrough came with resonance patterns. Non-invasive, scalable. For the first time, we didn't just stimulate one part of the brain, we amplified cross-regional synchronization. The results were, he paused, searching for the right word. Unnatural. Alex's pulse quickened. He felt the dangerous line he was about to cross, like standing on the edge of a cliff and staring down into fog. What happened to the subjects? Wells's gaze hardened. Some became savants overnight. Photographic memory, solving equations that took supercomputers days. One even claimed he could hear electromagnetic waves. But others, his voice trailed off. Alex swallowed. Others what? Wells leaned closer. Others couldn't shut it off. Their brains processed every sound, every sensation, every memory simultaneously. Imagine trying to listen to every radio station in the world at once. They burned out. Psychotic breaks, seizures, death. A chill ran down Alex's spine. You expect me to believe you were part of this? Wells didn't answer with words. Instead, he pulled something from his jacket pocket. A small silver drive, sleek and unmarked, no bigger than a thumb. He placed it on the table between them. This, Wells said, contains data from the Helix trials. The models, the resonance maps, even the failures. I'm too old to keep running with it. But you have the curiosity, the training, and maybe the recklessness. Alex stared at the drive, the library lights glinting off its surface. His rational mind screamed, "Don't touch it." His gut whispered, "This is what you've been waiting for." "Why me?" he asked. Wells shrugged. "Because you're already asking the right questions." And because his eyes softened, almost pitying. "You still believe curiosity is worth the risk." With that, he stood, slipping into the shadows between the shelves. By the time Alex blinked, Wells was gone, leaving only the silver drive behind. Alex sat frozen. He thought of the hours he'd spent debunking the 10% myth, of his professors insisting the brain was already running at full tilt. He thought of Wells's words, neural governors, resonance patterns, unnatural. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and touched the drive. It was cool against his skin. Too cool. A thrill shot through him. Equal parts fear and anticipation. He slipped it into his pocket, packed up his laptop, and walked out into the night. Above him, the Stanford Bell Tower loomed against the sky, its clock frozen at midnight. And for the first time in years, Alex Mason wondered if the myth wasn't a lie at all, just a warning. The science behind the myth Alex didn't sleep that night. He lay on his back and stared at the ceiling fan carving slow circles in the dark, listening to the small apartment sounds. The fridge motor kicking on, a motorcycle's distant snarl on El Camino, the occasional hush of tires and rain. The silver drive sat on his nightstand like a forbidden relic. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it glint. By 4:11 a.m., he gave up. He made coffee that tasted like scorched earth, opened his laptop, and slid the drive into the USB port. His machine hesitated, then chimed. A single folder appeared, Helix_yes. Inside, subdirectories labeled raw, models, res maps, notes, and a text file named, simply, read_me. He clicked the text file. It wasn't long. If you were reading this, you've already made your first decision. The second is whether you will pretend you can unknow what follows. Beneath the warning was a map of the archive and a short set of instructions. Start with notes /001_prologue.pdf. Then watch models /helix_schematic.mp4. Do not open res maps until you understand the schematic. Alex obeyed. He opened the PDF. It was a memoir disguised as a lab notebook and written in a clipped, restrained voice that still crackled with heat. The 10% myth persists not because it is true, but because it gives the ordinary person a story that keeps shame at bay. You could be extraordinary if the switch flipped. Brains are not idle. They are regulated. The difference is everything. The governor metaphor is imperfect, but it suffices. systems tuned for survival, not flourishes. We learned, eventually, that forcing flourish looks like fire. Alex scrolled, pausing at highlighted phrases. Energy budget. Excitation/inhibition balance. Small world topology. Catastrophic synchrony. He knew the terms. They lived in the literature like old landmarks. He opened the video next. A rotating 3D brain filled the screen, meshwork lattices threading through it, nodes and edges in blues and whites. The voiceover was female, clinical, oddly soothing. The human cortex is not a flat chessboard of identical tiles. It is a graph, a small world network, optimized to shuttle information quickly while minimizing wiring cost. Hubs connect to hubs. Local neighborhoods whisper among themselves. It is efficient because it must be. The brain runs on a battery barely larger than a light bulb. The animation highlighted bright hubs in the posterior cingulate, medial prefrontal cortex, temporoparietal junction. Nodes he recognized from papers on the default mode network, DMN. Then it flashed to sensory cortices, motor strips, Broca's and Wernicke's areas, cerebellar lobules, the thalamus punching above its weight as relay and gate. When you rest, the voice said, you are not idle. DMN lights up, rehearsing autobiographical memory, simulating futures, maintaining a cohesive self. When you act, task-positive networks rise and DMN dims. The dance is the point. The alternation is the sanity. Alex felt that sentence land. The alternation is the sanity. Helix didn't try to turn on the whole brain. That is neither possible nor desirable. Helix tried to increase cross-regional synchrony, to let more neighborhoods converse at once at higher bandwidth. The hypothesis: if we lift the governor slightly, certain cognitive capacities will bloom. The risk: if we lift it too far, the system loses its differential structure. Everything talks to everything, all at once. In physics, that's a phase transition. In a brain, it's a storm. The video cut to math, coupled oscillators, Kuramoto models, order parameters marching from 0 to 1. Then to MRI images with shimmering overlays, EEG traces stacked like dragon spines. Alex understood enough to feel the gravity even before the voice spelled it out. At low coupling, networks cooperate, performance improves. At high coupling, we observed catastrophic synchrony, a seizure without convulsions, a self dissolved in the noise of its own totality. The video ended on a frame that made him swallow, a subject lying inside an fMRI bore, eyes open, tears sliding into their hairline. The caption: ResMap Subject 14, T plus 39 minutes. Alex yanked out his earbuds and sat very still. His phone buzzed. Maya Singh. He stared at the name, conflicted. Maya was both his favorite person at the lab and the one most likely to talk him out of this. She was a third-year PhD with the steady hands of a surgeon and the patience of a saint. She'd been mentoring him since his first semester. He answered, "You awake?" She laughed. "Judging by your voice, you've been awake all night. You okay?" Define okay. Coffee deprived, but not hallucinating. He glanced at the drive. I might have something unusual. Unusual like a weird data set, or unusual like a lawsuit waiting to happen? Somewhere between. He hesitated. Can you meet me at the lab? Early. There was a pause on the line that meant she was calculating risk. Then, 30 minutes. The rain had melted into a gray morning when he slid into the basement lab. The place carried its own weather. Cold, ozone clean, smelled of alcohol wipes and faint plastic. The EEG room hummed softly. The TMS coil in the corner looked like a black figure eight waiting to be invoked. A whiteboard on wheels still held yesterday's scrawl. E/I balance gamma power working memory? In Maya's neat handwriting. She arrived in a navy hoodie and jeans, her hair in a bun, a paper cup cupped in both hands. Confess. Alex told her about Wells, about the drive, about the video. He didn't embellish. He didn't have to. The words sounded absurd enough in plain form. Maya listened without interrupting, only once lifting a hand to stop him and ask, "You're sure his name was Carter Wells?" "You know him?" Alex asked, startled. "I know of him. People whispered about his post-ARPA work when I was an undergrad. Neural interfaces in a private lab in Cambridge. Then he popped up in footnotes as a consultant on a couple of declassified projects. Then nothing." She sipped. "So the story tracks." Alex slid the drive across the stainless table. "It's all here. Maya didn't touch it. If this is what you say it is, we're skating on a razor. We open it, we're in. Chain of custody, IRB nightmares, human subject scandal if there are identifiers. There aren't," Alex said quickly. "At least, none that I've seen. The notes are anonymized. The imagery is scrubbed." "Scrubbed by whom?" She exhaled. "Okay, before we jump off any cliffs, let's get our frame straight." She set her coffee down and pulled the whiteboard closer. "The 10% thing, what is it really?" Alex welcomed the pivot. He needed something solid to stand on. "It's junk. People use maybe 10% of their neurons at once in certain tasks. Maybe, but that's a straw number. Different tasks light up different regions. Over a day, you use most of your brain. MRIs at rest show global activity, default mode network, salience network, etc. Long story short, there's no warehouse of unused brain waiting for a key." "Good," Maya said, scribbling. "Now, what does a brain cost to run?" "Energy," Alex said. 20% of resting metabolic power for an organ that's 2% of body weight." "Right." She underlined energy. "Evolution is cheap where it can be, but the brain is a diva. Everything it does is a trade. So why would it ever voluntarily run flat out?" "It wouldn't," Alex said. "It would melt down." "Exactly. Neurons are excitable tissue. Too much excitation relative to inhibition and you get seizures. Too much inhibition and you'll never get signal out of the noise. The trick is balance. A dynamic balance that changes with context." She drew 2 bars on the board, excitation and inhibition, and a little arrow sliding back and forth between them like a thermostat needle. Somebody who claims they can turn on 100% of the brain is saying they can freeze this balance at all gas. That's not power. That's failure to regulate. Alex nodded, grateful for the sanity of the outline. Helix doesn't claim to turn everything on. It claims to increase the coherence between regions, more bandwidth across hubs, which is plausible, Maya said, in principle. We already see cognitive gains when networks coordinate more efficiently. She wrote synchrony is not equal to saturation. But if you ramp synchrony too high, the system loses differentiation. Everything locks to a beat. You get, what did the video call it? Catastrophic synchrony. Yeah. She capped the marker and leaned on the table. And then there's metabolism. Even short bursts of high-rate firing spike energy demands. Astrocytes shuttle lactate to neurons in a pinch, but that's like burning the furniture to stay warm. You can do it, but you wouldn't want to live that way. Alex felt a strange warmth in his chest, the gratitude of being understood. So the myth gets it wrong twice. We're not using 10%, and we don't want to use 100% simultaneously. We want to use the right percent in the right places at the right times. She smiled faintly. The choreography is the intelligence. He exhaled. Still, what if Helix's first premise holds? That the brain is governed by circuit breakers that keep crosstalk below some threshold. If we could safely lift that cap a little, you could get better working memory, faster task switching, maybe accelerated learning, and maybe you could also trigger hallucinations, hypersensitivity, anxiety, insomnia, affect lability. Maya ticked them off like bones. The brain's filters are not mistakes. They're the price of being able to function in a world that's louder than we are. He pictured the teary-eyed subject in the MRI. "I know." Maya stared at the drive. "What does your gut say?" "That we open it." The words surprised him in their bluntness. Not to run anything, to read. If there's something real in there, ignoring it isn't safer. Sooner or later, someone less careful finds the same thing. Maya sighed. That's how every cautionary tale begins. And how most scientific advances begin, Alex said softly. She made a face that said, I hate that you're right. All right, ground rules. We plug this into the air gap box. No network, no cloud sync, no copy pasting to your laptop. We take notes on paper like it's 1987. We don't run any code that touches a physical device. And if I see words like custom stem coil design, we close it and talk to someone with a clearance badge and a bulletproof vest. Alex saluted. Aye, aye. They walked down the hall to the old analysis room that housed a dusty workstation not connected to the building network. Maya booted it, then nodded at the drive. Alex slid it in. A minute later, they were staring at the same folders, now rendered in an archaic font that made the whole thing feel like a museum exhibit. Start at notes, Maya said. They opened 002_myths_origins.txt. The 10% myth likely descends from misread popularizations of William James. We make use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources, filtered through early 20th century neurology silence about what glial cells do, then laundered by magazine writers into a numerical lie. It persists because it flatters the reader with hidden potential while absolving them of effort. It is useful. That is why it lives. Fair, Maya murmured. They opened 003_governors.md. Governors, layered regulatory apparatus spanning ion channel kinetics, interneuron-mediated inhibition, thalamic gating, neuromodulators, acetylcholine, attention, norepinephrine, arousal, dopamine, prediction error, serotonin, stability. Sleep consolidates patterns and clears metabolites. Waking consciousness uses selective attention to serialize experience. In short, your brain spends enormous energy to not process most of the world, thereby delivering the thin slice you call now. Maya tapped the screen. That's the line people don't get. The world is a fire hose. Consciousness is a straw. They moved to models/Helix_schematic MP4, the same video Alex had watched, but Maya scrubbed slowly, frame by frame, pausing to read equations. They're using a modified Kuramoto order parameter? That's aggressive. She squinted. And look at this footnote. They're not just boosting coupling uniformly. They're adjusting phase response curves differently by region, privileging hub-to-hub coherence. Like cranking up the bandwidth between airport hubs, Alex said, without changing connections between local airfields. Exactly. Risky but clever. Res maps? Alex asked, unable to keep the itch from his voice. Maya considered, then nodded. One. We open one. Then we stop and breathe. They opened res maps/subject_03/. Inside, pre- and post-stimulation fMRI connectivity matrices, time-resolved coherence graphs, EEG spectrograms. Also a single-page summary. Alex scanned, baseline IQ, 128. WM span, 7 ± 1. Post-helix, T plus 60-minute, WM span, 12 ± 1.2. Visual search reaction time, -23%. Reading speed, +31% with retention unchanged. Subjective report. I can hold more in my head like more screens open, but not lagging. Side effects, photophobia, mild nausea. Resolved at T plus 18 hours. He felt his mouth go dry. That's not snake oil. Maya didn't speak. She was reading the EEG spectrogram, broadband gamma power blooming, then stabilizing, alpha rhythms dipping during tasks, recovering at rest. It looks like they found the sweet spot for this subject this day. She flipped to subject_14/, the one from the video, almost against her own will. Summary. Baseline IQ, 115. Post-helix, T plus 35-minute. WM gains transient, then collapse. Subjective report. Too many voices. The lights are loud. Physiologic, theta gamma coupling unstable, runaway synchronization cascade at T plus 39, emergency termination, sequelae, insomnia, hyperacusis, resolved at T plus 9 days. Maya closed her eyes for a heartbeat. They lit a forest fire. Alex stared at the connectivity movie, colored threads tightening, brightening, then flooding the screen with uniform crimson. A phase transition with a human attached. He shut the window and leaned back. The room suddenly felt smaller. "Okay," Maya said, tone deliberately even, like a pilot reading a checklist while the plane shook. "Now we stop. We close it and sit with what we know." "What do we know?" Alex asked, grateful for the script. "That the 10% myth is a bedtime story for grown-ups. That the brain uses what it has, but it obeys regulators tuned by evolution. That there are plausible ways to change network synchronization, and that doing so can improve performance, sometimes at enormous risk. That without careful individual tuning and a governor on the governor, you can drive the system into catastrophic synchrony." She popped the drive out and set it between them. "We also know we are two grad students with neither clearance nor legal cover." Alex rubbed his face. "You think we should take this to DeMarco?" Dr. Carlo DeMarco ran the lab. Charismatic, brilliant, sometimes a showman, sometimes a monk. He had friends with grants and enemies with blogs. He also had a habit of pushing boundaries until boundaries pushed back. Eventually, Maya said, "But not with this in our pocket like a live grenade we picked up on the quad." "What then?" "Then we write." She picked up a pen and a legal pad, old school. "We draft a non-specific research question that could justify a literature review near this territory without tripping any lasers. We ground it in public science, graph theory of neural networks, energy constraints, excitation/inhibition balance, the functional role of spontaneous activity, the DMN. We build a case that the brain's promise isn't in turning everything on, but in improving selective synchrony. Then, if DeMarco bites, we steer him toward the safe end of the pool." "And the drive?" Maya looked at it for a long time. "It stays with you. You pretend it doesn't exist. We only touch it again if we have a plan and allies." Alex almost laughed. "This is the plan?" She grinned without humor. "This is the prologue to a plan." They spent the next 3 hours drafting in quiet bursts. The whiteboard filled with arrows and citations. Rakel, resting state, Bazaki, rhythms, Friston, free energy, Tononi, integrated information, Bassett, modularity and flexibility. When they flagged, they returned to basics and put them in plain language as if explaining to a jury. Brains are energy expensive, therefore they are stingy. Consciousness is not a screen of everything, but a bottleneck that serializes the world. Learning changes wiring. Plasticity aligns future processing with past success. Filters, sleep, attention, habituation are not bugs, they're the code. Coordination improves performance up to a point beyond which it becomes noise. At noon, Diego stuck his head in the door. Diego was the lab's data wrangler, perpetually cheerful, wearing a hoodie with a cartoon axon on it. "You two look like you robbed a bank at 3 a.m. and then argued about Kant." "Close," Maya said. "We're sketching a review DeMarco asked for." "DeMarco asked for a review?" Diego raised an eyebrow. "DeMarco asked you for a review like I asked my dog if he wants a treat." He peered at the board. "E/I balance? Small world networks? Ew. You're going for the grand unified theory of why we don't all become demigods when we drink Red Bull." Maya pointed her marker like a sword. "Exactly." Diego made the sign of the cross over the whiteboard. "Blessings on your citations." He was halfway out the door when he added, "By the way, DeMarco wants to see you both at 2. He said he has something electrifying to discuss." Maya, Alex, and the silver drive all looked at one another. "Great," Maya said weakly. "What could possibly go wrong?" They ate in the courtyard, shivering in their hoodies, fog beating in their hair. Students flowed around them, laughing, grousing, the ordinary world stubbornly doing its ordinary thing. Alex tried to let his nervous system hitch a ride on that ordinariness. It kept slipping off. "Tell me something boring," he said. Maya buttered a roll with forensic attention. Glial cells outnumber neurons. For decades, people thought they were just glue. Turns out astrocytes regulate neurotransmitter levels, feed neurons lactate, mop up potassium. Without them, your precious spikes would drown in their own mess. "That's not boring," Alex said. "That's soothing." "Fine." Synaptic pruning. Still soothing. Efficiency wins. "Sleep," she tried. "Slow waves, replay, glymphatic clearance. You need it. You skipped it." He smiled despite himself. "I'll do better tonight." They both knew he wouldn't. At 1:58, they rode the elevator up to DeMarco's office. The hallway smelled faintly of cedar from the diffuser he insisted calmed visitors. His door was open. Inside, books were everywhere in curated chaos. Papers on the desk, journals on the floor, a half-dissected model brain on a side table. DeMarco, in his trademark black shirt and blazer, looked up and beamed like a stage light. "Maya." "Alex." Sit." He waved expansively. "I've been thinking about attention." "That's a sentence you could say any day of the week," Maya said. "True, but today I have a toy." He held up a device that looked like a sleek halo of matte metal. New closed-loop neurofeedback rig. Picks up EEG rhythms, feeds auditory cues to nudge alpha and theta in real time. Non-invasive, IRB blessed, donor funded. I want to run a study on modulating working memory via rhythm training. Alex's skin prickled. "You want to increase cross-regional synchrony?" DeMarco tilted his head. "I want to train selective synchrony, Mr. Mason. Improve the dance, not blast the speakers." He leaned forward. "The myth is pernicious, the 10% thing. It makes people either smug or ashamed. The truth is better. We are already miraculous, and the miracle is the filter." Maya shot Alex a look that said, "Did we hear that?" DeMarco continued, warming to his theme. "I want to show the public that the path to enhancement runs through precision, not floodlights. I want to publish something beautiful and honest that kills the myth with kindness." Alex could feel Maya thinking. She angled her body so DeMarco couldn't see her face and raised her brows at Alex in a question. "Do we tell him?" Alex felt the weight of the drive in his pocket like an extra bone. He thought of Wells's lined face, the tears in Subject 14's hair, the voice in the video saying the alternation is the sanity. He also thought of the way science, done right, could put up guardrails where myth had thrown down speed bumps. "No myths," Maya said finally. "We were actually drafting a review this morning. Energy budgets, E/I balance, network topology. It might dovetail with your study." DeMarco clapped once. "See? This is why I hired you. You anticipate my needs, and then hand me a bibliography." He set the halo down and steepled his fingers. "Let's design the training protocol, gentle nudges, individualized thresholds. We monitor not just performance, but side effects, sleep, mood, sensory sensitivity. We move slowly." Alex exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. If there was a safe path through the minefield, this was what it would look like. Humble steps, careful instruments, an ethos that said no heroes, no martyrs. And, DeMarco added, eyes twinkling, "We write a popular piece for The Atlantic while we're at it. You don't use 10% of your brain. You use all of it beautifully." Subtitle: Why Precision, Not Power, Will Shape the Future of Cognition. Maya smirked. "Who writes it?" "You do," DeMarco said, pointing at both of them, with me whining in the margin. They left the office in a hush that felt like reprieve. When the elevator doors closed, Maya whispered, "I'm not saying the universe delivered us a safer substitute for Helix, but it kind of did," Alex finished. They walked back to the lab. Alex touched the drive in his pocket and pictured locking it in a drawer for a very long time. He pictured, too, A future where the myth died, not with scandal, but with an essay and a dataset and 1,000 cautious replications. It was almost enough to make him forget the library at midnight and the man in shadows. Almost. That night, he meant to sleep. He really did. He set his phone face down, made tea, put on ocean sounds, breathed like the apps said to breathe. For a while, it worked. His body softened, thoughts slowed, the room cooled. But somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., his mind slipped its leash and went walking. He found himself at his desk, listening to the city's quiet and opening a new document titled The Brain We Actually Have. The words came easily at first. We're not creatures failing to use our brains. We are creatures whose brains are failing on our behalf, refusing most of the world so that a tiny, useful fraction can feel like a life. He paused, fingers hovering. Then, against his better judgment, he opened the air-gapped workstation and slid the drive in. Not to run models, not to touch code, just to read notes /007_ethics.md. He told himself he needed a paragraph, something true to anchor the piece he and Maya would propose to DeMarco. The file was surprisingly simple. We learn late. Enhancement is not the right frame. The right frame is allocation. There is no glory in turning everything up. There is wisdom in learning what to turn down. If the myth lives, it is because we have not made the real story lovable. Alex closed his eyes. He could almost hear Maya, "Make it lovable, then." He pulled out his notebook, the cheap one with the cardboard cover, and wrote 3 words he'd underline in the morning. Precision is kindness. On the way to bed, he set the drive back on the nightstand. It sat there, small and unremarkable, as the sky outside lightened toward a blue that meant morning was near. He slid under the covers and finally fell, not into sleep, exactly, but into a place adjacent to it where the day's facts loosened and made room for softer shapes. He dreamed, of course he dreamed, of a metronome ticking in a quiet room, and of people dancing not all at once, not to drown the silence, but one by one, in a sequence that felt like a life. When he woke, the myth hadn't died. Myths rarely do. They just lose ground, one good story at a time. And now, he and Maya had one to tell. Alex had sworn he wouldn't do it. He told himself, told Maya, told the empty air of his apartment that he would keep the Helix drive sealed away, a relic to be studied cautiously, in daylight, with protocols and consent forms. But like a hidden itch, the thought of it burned through every ordinary hour. Lectures blurred, papers turned into white noise. Even Maya's jokes over takeout faltered against the pull. The human brain wasn't built for secrets, especially not secrets that whispered of forbidden frontiers. On a Thursday night, rain pressing soft fingers against his window, Alex gave in. He cleared his desk, powered on the air-gapped workstation, and slid the drive in. His pulse thudded in his ears like bass from a distant party. He told himself, just look, just peek, nothing dangerous. Inside the ResMaps folder, one subdirectory glowed at him like a dare, proto-stim_interface. He opened it. There wasn't code to run. Not exactly. It was a collection of resonance profiles, maps of how stimulation frequencies interacted with cortical hubs. Each was labeled with dry identifiers, but the README was almost casual in tone, like lab notes left for a trusted colleague. For non-invasive demo, feed audio, stimulus into headphones. Binaural differentials at indicated frequencies. No risk below 20-minute exposure. Mild aftereffects, tingling, sensory vividness. Warning: do not exceed T plus 25. Use subject range of first. Range be untested outside clinic. Alex leaned back. His rational mind screamed. This is exactly how horror stories start. He imagined headlines. Stanford student electrocutes brain with Black Ops soundtrack. But the scientist in him, the restless, desperate part, argued back. This wasn't implant surgery or gene editing. This was audio. Sound waves. Binaural beats, essentially, which people already messed with on YouTube for meditation and study flow. How dangerous could 20 minutes of carefully tuned sound be? His hand shook slightly as he connected his headphones. He pulled up stem profile underscore a 01 dot wave. A soft hum filled his ears, two close frequencies producing a faint pulsing wobble like the ghost of a rhythm underwater. At first, nothing happened except mild annoyance. He almost laughed at himself. Congratulations, Alex, he thought. You broke into the Pentagon to listen to fancy whale songs. But then, the hum began to settle into him. Not outside, but inside. A pressure at the edge of thought, subtle as the tide. His vision sharpened. Letters on the books across the room seemed to snap in a higher resolution. The air felt denser, every sound etched with more contour. He could hear the refrigerator's compressor cycling, the faint irregularity in his upstairs neighbor's steps, even the rhythm of his own blinking. He pulled the headphones off, startled. The world dulled immediately, like someone had turned down the gain. Heart hammering, he put them back on. The hum seeped in again, syncing with his pulse, weaving into his breath. Minutes passed. His thoughts, normally scattered and jittery, aligned like iron filings around a magnet. He opened a journal article he'd been struggling to parse for weeks. Dense math, nested clauses, the kind of thing that usually left him exhausted. Now, each line seemed translucent, structure shining through. Equations weren't obstacles, but music, each term a note in a melody he could hum. His working memory stretched. He could hold entire pages in mind, flip them, compare them, without the usual decay. It was like having 4 extra arms inside his skull. At minute 12, exhilaration replaced fear. He scrawled notes in a frenzy, diagrams spilling across paper. His brain felt wide, bright, alive. At minute 15, a shift. The clarity grew too sharp. He could hear his heartbeat in stereo, feel the micro textures of pen against paper like thunder. The refrigerator compressor was no longer background. It was roaring. His upstairs neighbor's steps became earthquakes. He pressed his palms to his ears, but the sound were inside, not out. The hum pulsed harder, crawling along his nerves. Thoughts multiplied too quickly to follow. Every possibility branched into dozens more, a fractal of insight that began to tangle. He saw links between articles, between ideas, between memories from childhood and formulas from neuroscience. Too many links. His brain lit up like Times Square, and he couldn't dim it. Panic swelled. He ripped the headphones off. The silence slammed into him, but the world didn't go back. The edges stayed sharp. Every detail screamed for attention. Dust motes cartwheeling in the lamplight, the slight wobble of the fan blade, the faint acid aftertaste of his coffee. He staggered to the sink and splashed water on his face. Cold bit like knives. He gasped. Minutes dragged before the intensity ebbed, the edges softening just enough to breathe. When he finally collapsed onto the couch, drenched in sweat, he realized his hands were still trembling. He glanced at the clock. 23 minutes. He had pushed it past the warning. And he understood now, viscerally, what Wells had meant. The brain could stretch. It could blaze brighter, faster, deeper. But it wasn't free. The filters weren't laziness. They were mercy. Without them, the world was too much. Still, lying there in the aftermath, Alex couldn't deny it. For a brief window, he had been extraordinary. The next morning, Maya noticed before he said a word. "You look like hell," she said, dropping into the chair beside him in the lab. And not the cute, stressed grad student hell. The I saw God through a microscope, and he was a nice kind of hell. Alex tried for a smile. Failed. Maya's eyes narrowed. "You did something." He swallowed. "I tested one of the Helix resonance files." Her hand froze halfway to her coffee. "You what?" "Just the audio. 20 minutes. Her voice dropped, razor quiet. "You could have fried yourself." "I know. But Maya..." His words tumbled out, raw, urgent. He described the clarity, the expansion, the flood. How beautiful it had been. And how terrifying. When he finished, she just stared, expression unreadable. Then she set down her cup with deliberate calm. Okay, she said. First, you're an idiot. Second, you're lucky. Third, tell me everything. Every sensation, every after effect, every goddamn detail. So he did. She listened like a surgeon, questions precise. When did it intensify? Did your vision shift? Any hallucinations? How long until baseline returned? Finally, she leaned back. So it worked, at least in a narrow sense of enhancing function. And it nearly broke you. Alex nodded. I felt like I'd opened all the tabs in my head at once. And for a while, I could handle them. Then I couldn't. Maya pressed her fingers to her temples. This is the danger. Enhancement isn't a dial you turn up forever. It's a curve. Past a point, it collapses. But imagine, Alex said softly, if we could hold just shy of that collapse. If we could learn where the edge is balanced there. It could change everything. Learning, memory, therapy. Her gaze snapped to him. Or weaponize everything. Surveillance, soldiers, exploitation. He flinched. She was right. The line between miracle and catastrophe was thinner than hair. Maya stood. We need to talk to DeMarco. Carefully. We can't sit on this alone. Alex hesitated. He remembered Wells's warning, the haunted eyes, the way he'd slipped away into shadow. Curiosity is worth the risk. Maybe. But as he packed his bag, the resonance still echoed faintly in his skull, a ghost pulse that whispered of unlocked doors. That night, Alex dreamed again, not of metronomes or dancers, but of a city at night, every window blazing with light at once. It was beautiful, and it was burning. The morning after the experiment, Alex woke with a skull full of static. At first, he thought it was just lack of sleep, the kind of fog every grad student carried like a second skin. But this was different. His head throbbed not with dull ache, but with sharp clarity, like the world volume had been turned up 3 notches past comfortable. The tick of the cheap wall clock grated against his nerves, every second a hammer. He staggered into the bathroom. The mirror showed eyes rimmed red, pupils dilated like he'd downed a gallon of caffeine. He splashed water on his face. The cold shot through his skin like electricity, and for a fleeting moment, the world sharpened again. Too sharp. He shut his eyes and whispered, "What the hell did I do?" At the lab that afternoon, Maya saw it immediately. Jesus. Alex, you look like you've been awake for a month. I feel like I have. She sat him down, pulled her chair close, and examined him the way a doctor might. Headache? Yes. Noise sensitivity? Yes. Heart rate normal? He hesitated. Mostly. Her jaw tightened. This is why we don't mess with prototypes at 2 in the morning. He wanted to protest, but the truth sat too heavy. Instead, he said it wasn't all bad. Maya's eyes softened, but only slightly. Describe it again. So he told her, voice low, about the burst of clarity, the way information had flowed effortlessly, how every detail had snapped into resolution. But then he described the flood, the roar of too much input, the fractal tangle of thoughts, the suffocating collapse. Maya leaned back, arms crossed. Classic overstimulation. You boosted excitation without the brakes of inhibition. The brain isn't designed to run flat out. It's designed to balance. Like trying to sprint a marathon. Alex rubbed his temples. It felt like the filters were gone. Like I could see the world unedited. And how long until it broke you? 15 minutes. She nodded grimly. That tracks. Later that evening, as they sat in the quiet corner of the lab, Maya sketched a diagram on the whiteboard. Excitation gas, inhibition, brakes, energy fuel. You overloaded gas, killed the brakes, and nearly drained the tank. Alex stared at it. But if the gas and brakes could be tuned together, just right, that's the fantasy, she cut in. That's what every neurohacker dreams of. Perfect balance. Infinite flow. But evolution already optimized this system for survival, not brilliance. Push too far, and the system crashes. Alex leaned forward, voice soft but insistent. But what if we could push just enough? Safely. Imagine stroke recovery, Alzheimer's, PTSD, learning acceleration. Isn't that worth exploring? Maya met his gaze. And imagine the flip side. Weaponized soldiers who don't need sleep, workers forced to optimize, children fed programs before they even know who they are. Do you really think governments or corporations would leave this in the hands of therapists and teachers? Her words hit him like cold rain. He thought of Wells's haunted eyes, of the subjects described in the notes. One soaring to genius, another crushed by too much input. He thought of the way the world had felt, lit with unbearable intensity. And yet, he also remembered the first 10 minutes, the golden minutes. The way everything had fit together, like the universe itself had briefly revealed its blueprint. He couldn't let it go. The consequences worsened over the next days. By Friday, sleep had become elusive. Whenever he closed his eyes, patterns swarmed behind his eyelids. Geometric spirals, branching equations, the hum of phantom resonance. His brain refused silence. At the lab, he snapped at Diego over a trivial coding error, then immediately apologized, embarrassed by how sharp his voice had been. He caught himself staring too long at the whiteboard, lost in connections no one else could see, until Maya shook his shoulder back to reality. On Saturday, sounds became unbearable. He wore earplugs just to walk to the corner store. The chatter of strangers was like a chorus of megaphones, every word slamming into his skull. And then came the tremor. Sunday morning, typing at his desk, his right hand jerked. Not much, just a shiver through his fingers, but enough to freeze him. He stared at his hand until the tremor stopped, his heart pounding. By Monday, he confessed everything to Maya. She listened jaw tight. You're describing post-stictal symptoms. Minor seizure activity. Maybe you overloaded circuits and they're misfiring. His mouth went dry. I've never had seizures. You might now. He swallowed hard. So what do I do? Maya looked at him, expression torn between anger and care. You stop. You don't touch the drive again. You let your brain rest. Maybe you get checked by a neurologist. He wanted a nod. He wanted a promise. But deep down, he knew promises wouldn't hold. The memory of those golden minutes, the clarity, the expansion, burned too brightly. That week, the outside world started to notice. DeMarco, ever perceptive, pulled Alex aside after a meeting. You look overstimulated. His tone was half joking, half concerned. Don't burn out, Mason. The program needs your brain intact. Alex forced a laugh. Just too much coffee. But he saw the doubt in DeMarco's eyes. And at night, alone in his apartment, the whisper of the resonance called to him. Not as sound, but as memory. His brain replayed it like a phantom limb. He sat at his desk, fingers hovering over the drive. He told himself no, not again. But another voice, the one that sounded suspiciously like Wells's, whispered, curiosity is worth a risk. He closed his laptop. He paced the room. He tried breathing exercises, tea, even a jog at midnight. Nothing silenced the hunger. At 2 a.m., he pulled the drive from its drawer. He stared at it for a long time. Then, with trembling hands, he locked it back away. Not tonight. The consequences weren't just physical. They seeped into his mind in subtler ways. By the end of the week, Alex began to notice patterns everywhere. Too many patterns. The cadence of a professor's speech mirrored the rhythm of traffic lights outside. The hum of the fridge seemed to encode Morse-like sequences. Even his own heartbeat felt synchronized to something larger, as if the world was conspiring in resonance. He told himself it was just heightened perception, maybe anxiety. But sometimes, just before sleep, he swore he could hear the Wi-Fi router's faint electromagnetic whine, like a hidden radio station leaking into his skull. He didn't tell Maya. Not yet, because deep down, he feared what she might say, that the filters were failing, that his brain hadn't fully come back. That maybe, just maybe, he'd left the door open and couldn't close it again. The following Monday, DeMarco announced a lab-wide meeting. "Big news," he said, eyes sparkling. "Our grant for non-invasive synchronization training came through. We're greenlit. EEG, closed-loop audio, maybe even mild tax if the IRB blesses us. We're going to show the world what careful, ethical neuromodulation can do." The room buzzed with excitement. Diego fist-bumped Maya. A few undergrads whispered with glee. Alex forced a smile. He should have felt proud, relieved even. This was a path forward without the shadows of Helix. A chance to build something safe, real, useful. But as DeMarco spoke, Alex's mind wandered. He remembered the golden minutes again, the surge of clarity. He thought of Wells's words. "We amplified cross-regional synchronization. The results were unnatural." And a question dug into him like a thorn. What if unnatural was exactly what humanity needed? That night, alone again, Alex opened his notebook. At the top of a fresh page, he wrote, "Question: how close to the edge can we safely stand?" His hand trembled as he underlined it. The myth of 10% had been a lie. The truth was stranger. We used all of our brain, but we were shackled by governors, by safety valves honed by evolution. To break them was to risk collapse. But maybe, just maybe, evolution's caution wasn't enough anymore. Maybe the future belonged to those willing to dance on the edge. By the time DeMarco's team started drafting the official proposal for their synchronization study, word had already slipped beyond the lab's walls. It wasn't supposed to. Everybody swore to discretion. Every document was tucked behind IRB jargon. But in academia, secrets leaked faster than solvents. It began innocuously. Diego, chatting with a friend at MIT over Slack, bragged that their lab had a neurofeedback system that could make your working memory do push-ups. A throwaway line, a little flex in the endless contest of grad student one-upmanship. The friend laughed, screenshotted, and shared it in a group chat. From there, it spread like sparks on dry tinder. Within a week, a journalist from Wired emailed DeMarco, asking for comment on reports of Stanford research in brain synchronization technologies. DeMarco waved it off with his trademark smile. "We're always exploring the rhythms of cognition. Nothing sci-fi here. Just careful, incremental science." But Alex knew better. Because Wells's drive was burning a hole in his desk drawer, and the descriptions in the leak sounded too close to Helix. Too precise. He met Maya in the corner of the library one evening. She slammed her laptop shut and glared at him. "It's starting." He didn't ask what she meant. He already knew. "They'll come sniffing," she continued. "Journalists, yes, but also others. Agencies, corporations, people who don't ask for consent forms." Alex rubbed his forehead. Maybe it's good. Maybe sunlight kills the myth faster. The public deserves to know the truth, that it's not about 10%, it's about regulation, balance, synchrony. Maya leaned closer, voice sharp. "You're dreaming if you think nuance survives the internet. They'll turn it into clickbait. Scientists unlock full brain potential. Self-help gurus will slap it on book covers. Tech billionaires will call it the key to the next revolution. Politicians will salivate about national competitiveness. And somewhere in all that noise, the truth, the dangerous, fragile truth, will vanish." Alex couldn't argue. She was right. Already, he'd seen a tweet with 10,000 likes. If we only use 10% of our brain, Stanford's about to unleash the other 90. The singularity is here. He wanted to throw his phone against the wall. 3 days later, DeMarco called an emergency lab meeting. The air in the room was electric, buzzing with unspoken dread. Even the undergrads looked spooked. DeMarco stood at the head of the table, a printout of the Wired article in his hand. "This," he said, slapping the paper, "is what happens when sloppy whispers become headlines." His Italian accent thickened when he was angry, and today it was thunder. "We are not miracle workers. We are not myth makers. We are scientists. Then maybe we should say something, Diego muttered. Like, actually explain what we're doing instead of letting them run wild. DeMarco's eyes softened just slightly. Diego, I admire your optimism. But the world doesn't want the truth. The world wants magic. If we speak, they will twist our words. If we stay silent, they will twist the silence. So we must walk a knife's edge. Maya crossed her arms. And what about the agencies? You know they'll come knocking. DARPA, NIH, maybe even others. DeMarco nodded grimly. Which is why we publish fast. Peer-reviewed, rigorous, cautious. We frame this not as unlocking the brain, but as fine-tuning an orchestra. Precision, not power. Filters, not floodgates. Alex felt a pang of hope. Maybe this was the way. Make the science lovable, as that Helix note had said. Kill the myth with elegance. But later that night, walking home alone under the sodium streetlights, he spotted a black SUV parked at the curb. The kind with tinted windows, engine idling too smoothly. He told himself it was nothing. Plenty of SUVs prowled Palo Alto. Still, his skin prickled. By the weekend, the first wave of societal reaction hit. TikTok was ablaze with brain hacks, kids blasting binaural beats, claiming it helped them memorize history dates or solve calculus faster. Hashtags like hashtag fullbrain and hashtag Helix Challenge trended with millions of views. YouTube influencers made videos titled, "I tried the Stanford Brain Experiment for 24 hours," mostly clickbait meditations with techno soundtracks, but the thumbnail screamed 100% brain power. Alex scrolled through them with growing horror. They don't even know what they're playing with, he whispered. Maya, peering over his shoulder, said they never do. And then came the darker corners. Conspiracy forums claimed Stanford had resurrected Encultura. Prepper blogs warned of mind control rays. A senator from Texas tweeted that America couldn't fall behind China in brain technology. It was happening. The myth was mutating again, fed by the Helix echo leaking from Wells's drive, twisted by media, amplified by fear. On Monday, DeMarco was summoned to a closed meeting with the dean and several people Alex didn't recognize. They wore suits too sharp for academia and carried themselves with the quiet authority of people who signed classified contracts. When DeMarco returned, his face was pale but composed. "Nothing to worry about," he told the lab. "We have friends in Washington. They just want reassurance." I gave it, but his hands trembled slightly as he spoke. That night, Alex couldn't sleep. The tremors in his hand had returned, stronger this time. He tried to write in his notebook, but the pen scrawled jittery lines. His brain hummed with phantom resonance, a constant undertone beneath thought. In desperation, he pulled the drive from the drawer again. He opened the folder labeled Ethics_Notes, searching for comfort for guidance. Instead, he found a line that froze him. "We assumed society would reject unsafe methods. We were wrong. They begged for more. The problem was never the myth. The problem was hunger." Alex sat back, heart pounding. Outside his window, another SUV rolled slowly down the street, headlights sweeping. Maya's words echoed in his mind. "They'll come sniffing." He realized then, it wasn't just his own brain at risk anymore. It was everyone's. The world had heard a whisper of Helix, and the world was already salivating. The tremors came back on a Tuesday morning. Alex had been sitting at his desk, pretending to annotate a paper on thalamocortical circuits, when his hand seized again. The pen slipped, carving a jagged slash across the page. He gritted his teeth, waiting for the spasm to pass. This time, it didn't stop after a second. His entire arm tingled, as though tiny electric spiders crawled beneath his skin. He clenched his fist, willing it still. It wasn't pain. It was worse, a premonition, a warning flare from inside his own nervous system. When it finally eased, he was drenched in sweat. He knew what it meant. He had gone too far with Helix, and now his brain was slipping. That night, he sat with Maya in the lab's quiet back room. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, the only sound besides their breathing. You have to stop, she said. No more experiments. No more files. No more late nights with that drive. Alex didn't answer. His eyes were on the whiteboard, where yesterday's notes about synchrony thresholds stared back at him. Alex, she pressed. This isn't curiosity anymore. It's compulsion. Look at you. You're twitching. You can't sleep. You're barely eating. You're falling apart. He tore his gaze from the board and met hers. You don't understand. I saw it, Maya. For those first minutes, everything made sense. Every connection, every pattern. It was like touching the raw code of reality. Do you know what that means? What it could do? Her jaw tightened. Yes. And I also saw what it did to Subject 14. To you. You think you're unique? You think the rules of biology don't apply because you want them not to. Alex's voice dropped, almost pleading. What if the rules are meant to be broken? Evolution tuned our brains for survival, not truth, not potential. What if survival's ceiling is holding us back? Maya slammed her palm on the table. Or maybe survival is the only reason we're even here to ask the question. The words echoed through the room. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Alex whispered, I need to know how far it goes. Maya closed her eyes. Then you're going to kill yourself. That weekend, he proved her right. He told himself he'd just observe more data. Just read. Just analyze. No exposure. But the drive whispered. The files beckoned. And by 2 a.m., headphones hugged his ears again. This time he didn't stop at 20 minutes. The hum was familiar now, a pulse his neurons recognized instantly. Within minutes, the clarity flooded back, the surge of energy, the mental expansion. He devoured journal articles, solving equations in his head before he finished reading them. He mapped connections between disparate fields, quantum coherence models of microtubules, Bayesian brain theory, even evolutionary anthropology. It all wove together like threads in a single tapestry. At 20 minutes, he should have stopped. His body screamed at him, heart racing, breath shallow, fingertips tingling. But his mind was soaring. Just 5 more, he told himself. 5 more minutes on edge. At 25 minutes, reality fractured. The auditory hum seemed to split, multiplying into overtones that shouldn't exist. His vision sharpened until he saw the flicker of the fluorescent light as discrete frames. The world broke into packets, a digital feed rendered too high-res. And then came the flood. Memories slammed into him all at once. His mother's face on his first day of school, the smell of wet grass during a childhood soccer game, the exact angle of sunlight on his dorm window last Tuesday. Thousands of moments unspooled simultaneously, indistinguishable from the present. He clutched his head, gasping. It was too much. Too many channels open. Every neuron firing in chorus. No hierarchy, no filter. This is it, he thought. Catastrophic synchrony. He stumbled from his chair, knocking the headphones loose. They dangled, still hissing faintly. He collapsed onto the floor, curling against the storm inside his skull. Time lost meaning. He didn't know if minutes or hours passed. When the flood finally receded, he lay trembling, staring at the ceiling. The world was quieter, but not right. The edges were wrong. Sounds echoed with faint delay. Colors shimmered too vividly. He pushed himself upright, body shaking. His reflection in the dark window looked alien, pale, hollow-eyed, mouth slack. He had gone too far, and he knew it wasn't temporary this time. Something in him had changed. For 2 days, he hid it. He smiled through lab meetings, nodded at DeMarco's pep talks, mumbled excuses about lack of sleep. But Maya saw. She always saw. On the 3rd day, she cornered him in the stairwell. You did it again. He froze. Maya, don't lie. I can see it. You're twitching. You're glassy. You're not here. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off. Do you even hear yourself? You're chasing a high, Alex. That's all this is now. A drug. And like every drug, it's going to leave you in pieces. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to tell her about the visions, the patterns, the insights still reverberating in his skull. But the words died, because she was right. And yet, part of him didn't care. Because even in the aftermath, even in the tremors, he still remembered the golden clarity. And nothing in the ordinary world compared. By Friday, the side effects worsened. He began hearing voices, not external, not hallucinations exactly, but internal echoes. Fragments of old conversations replaying unbidden, overlapping with present thought. His mother's laugh folded into Maya's warnings, into Wells's gravelly voice. In lectures, the professor's words tangled with his own inner monologue until he couldn't tell which was which. At night, the phantom hum returned, even without headphones. It pulsed in his skull, faint but relentless, like a parasite that had claimed territory. Sleep became impossible. Dreams bled into waking. He scribbled frantically in his notebook, page after page of diagrams and equations, half nonsense, half brilliance. He couldn't stop. The pen moved as if driven by something outside himself. By Saturday, his right hand shook constantly. By Sunday, he fainted in the shower. We came to, Maya was there. He was on his couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face hovering above him. Her eyes were wet, though her voice was steady. "You're done, Alex. No more. You're going to the hospital." He tried to sit up. "I can't. They won't understand. They'll scan me, medicate me, file me as a psych case. The research will vanish." "Good," she snapped. "Better the research vanish than you." He grabbed her hand, desperate. "Maya, I saw it. All of it. For a moment, I understood what the brain could be. Not 10%, not 100%. Everything at once." Her voice broke. "And what did it cost you?" He had no answer. That night, alone after she left, Alex stared at the Helix drive on his desk. He knew he couldn't touch it again, not if he wanted to live. But he also knew he couldn't destroy it, because the hunger wouldn't let him. Because part of him still believed that the limit wasn't a wall but a threshold. And thresholds were meant to be crossed. Wells reappeared the way hurricanes do. At first as a pressure drop Alex could feel before he could name it, then as a shape on the horizon, and then, suddenly, everywhere. Alex was sitting on a bench behind the lab, staring at the campus eucalyptus swaying in a damp morning breeze, when a shadow crossed his notebook. He didn't look up right away. His right hand trembled over the page, the tremor that had never fully left since the second exposure. He focused on the 3 words he'd written, underlined twice, a mantra he was trying to make muscle memory. "Precision is kindness." "Not bad," Wells said. "I wish we'd had that sentence." Alex looked up. The same dark jacket, the same lined face, the same eyes, older than the rest of him, as if time had camped there. "You shouldn't be here," Alex said. "I'm not," Wells said and sat down. The eucalyptus hissed. Students drifted by on skateboards and scooters, moving in diagonals that always seemed to surprise the crows. For a moment, Alex allowed the ordinariness to hold him. Sunlight on concrete, the faint sour smell of coffee grounds in the trash can, the steady wash of distant traffic. It steadied the noise inside enough to make sentences. "I went too far," Alex said. "I know," Wells said. "You gave me a weapon and called a map." Wells's mouth twisted. "I gave you a record of our mistakes and called a warning. You ignored the label. Because I'm arrogant? Because you're human." Alex surprised himself by laughing, a small exhale that didn't quite find joy. "They're circling," he said. "Journalists, funders, agencies. DeMarco is trying to steer the narrative toward nuance. Maya is writing like a woman possessed. But the world wants a headline." "The world always wants a headline," Wells said. "The truth is an essay." "Then help us write it." Wells studied him for a long time. "You want me to step into the light. I want you to stop haunting the edges like a ghost who's tired of being righteous." The older man looked away, toward the trees, as if listening to something deeper than leaves. "I told myself I would never stand at a podium again. I told myself I'd done enough harm in small rooms without windows. Small rooms without windows built the myth's scaffolding, Alex said. Help me tear it down. In public. Wells exhaled through his nose. For a moment, he looked more tired than old. All right, he said. One podium. One truth. They did it like a trial. Evidence presented, conclusions constrained, stakes made plain. DeMarco ran point. He had a gift for turning complex science into stories without sanding off the edges that mattered. He secured a seminar slot that would be live-streamed, a joint colloquium between neuroscience and ethics. The dean added a university seal and an anxious email urging spirited, respectful conversation. The room filled in a way that made the fire marshal adjust his tie. Alex sat on stage between Maya and Wells, all three of them behind handheld mics like sinners before a parish. He had not slept much. The phantom hum still visited him in the dead times, but this morning felt different, quieter, as if his nervous system had agreed to be on its best behavior in public. He gripped a bottle of water in two hands to hide the tremor. DeMarco opened. There's a story, he said, that we use only 10% of our brains. Today, we will bury that story, not with derision, but with love for what the brain actually is. He clicked a slide, fMRI activity maps during rest and task, colorful, alive, messy. Brains are metabolically greedy, he said, and evolution abhors waste. You are using all of yours, not simultaneously at full tilt, but in a choreography. Regions trade-off. Networks interlock. Rest is not idleness. It is rehearsal. The alternation is the sanity. Maya took the baton. She spoke cleanly, the way she wrote. Unadorned, precise, lethal with simplicity. Enhancement, she said, is the wrong word. Allocation is the right one. The brain's miracle is not power, it's selectivity. It refuses most of reality, so a useful slice can be experienced as a life. She showed graphs. Alpha rhythms dipping during attention, gamma power blooming with working memory, the seesaw of excitation and inhibition. Turn everything up, and you don't get genius, she said. You get noise. You get seizures. You lose the borders that let a self exist. Then Wells spoke. He did not dramatize. He presented the Helix trials as a series of lessons written in bloodless fonts and human costs. He showed anonymous connectivity matrices, one that tightened and settled into a new, productive coordination, another that locked and flooded into catastrophic synchrony. He said we when he meant I and they, and he said subjects with the care of someone who still wrote their first names in private. If you push cross-regional synchrony too far, he said, you do not ascend. You homogenize. Differentiation collapses. The brain becomes a choir that only sings one note. A hand went up in the second row before the Q&A. DeMarco frowned but nodded. A man in a crisp suit stood. So you're saying it's impossible to safely increase capacity? Maya answered, no, I'm saying capacity is not volume. It's precision. We can train rhythms. We can coax networks to cooperate more efficiently. That's what our closed-loop neurofeedback study will test, slowly, with consent and oversight. But we must stop telling people they're the magical reserve waiting to be flipped on. That myth is a predator. Why? The man asked. Because it tells you the problem is laziness, Maya said, voice flat. And then it sells you shortcuts. Hands went up like a field of white flags. A sophomore asked about binaural beats she saw on TikTok. A postdoc asked whether improved allocation could help ADHD. An ethicist asked what informed consent looked like when cultural pressure to optimize already bent the will. A journalist asked if the Helix files were part of Stanford's work. Wells took that one. No, he said. They were part of mine. I brought them here as a warning. He looked toward Alex without moving his head. And I brought them to a person who needed to see the edge for himself. A few heads swiveled. Alex felt heat crawl up his neck. He took a breath he hoped looked like patience. I tested an audio profile, he said into the mic. The room twitched collectively. It gave me 10 minutes of clarity that felt like grace. And then it almost broke me. I live with the aftershocks. They are not romantic. He opened his hands. They shook. He let them. If you came for a superhero origin story, I am sorry to disappoint you. This is a story about filters and about respect. Someone in the back scoffed. So you're saying we should accept our limits? I'm saying you should understand what a limit is, Alex said, surprising himself with steady anger. Some limits are cages. Some are guardrails. If you're on a cliff, the rail is not oppression. It's mercy. Silence held. Then the questions softened. The room began to think with them rather than at them. It felt for the first time in weeks like science instead of spectacle. Afterward, a cluster formed around the stage. The Wired reporter waited with her recorder lowered. A gesture of decency he clocked and decided to repay. A group of high schoolers in matching hoodies asked for reading lists. Maya gave them titles and told them to sleep at least 8 hours. A veteran with a tremor like Alex's asked quiet questions about PTSD. DeMarco got his email and said, "Only in a trial. Only with care." Wells stood alone for a moment. Alex joined him. "You did well," Wells said without looking. "So did you," Alex said. For once. The old man's mouth tightened. They'll still write their headlines. They'll still sell their hacks. But some of them will hear you. Some as a start. Wells nodded. Some is how civilization inches forward. They published fast. First, a preprint that read like a guide rope. A careful review that dismantled the myth, walked through the energy and network constraints of human cognition, and laid out a taxonomy of interventions from harmless, sleep, aerobic exercise, mindfulness, education, to speculative, non-invasive neurofeedback, to redline, phase coupling escalation beyond individualized thresholds. It cited broadly and modestly. It had no silver bullets. It ended with a paragraph that sounded like a closing argument. We do not become more human by lighting every bulb. We become more human by learning which lights to dim so the scene can be seen. Then came the op-ed, yes, in the Atlantic, with a title that made DeMarco insufferably pleased. You don't use 10% of your brain. You use all of it beautifully. The subtitle, Why Precision, Not Power, Will Shape the Future of Cognition. They told stories of a stroke patient who recovered through targeted therapy, of an underfunded school that improved student performance by letting children sleep and eat and move, of a lab that chose slower, safer methods over fireworks. The last story was a parable that did not say Helix, but did say fire. The world did what the world does. Some people read and changed their minds. Others weaponized what confirmed their priors. Influencers still chase clicks, but a few updated their scripts. Hashtag filters not floodgates trended for a weekend alongside recipes and dances. A senator quoted the op-ed badly in a hearing. An NIH program officer quoted it well in a memo. A tech founder wrote a thread about allocation as the new frontier and offered funding that DeMarco politely redirected to scholarships and open-source toolkits. The SUVs faded. There were setbacks. A copycat lab across the country bragged about a stimulation protocol just shy of seizure. Within a month, they scrubbed their website after a subject sued. A glossy self-help book climbed charts promising unlock the other 90%. Its footnotes a seesaw between real papers and wishful thinking. A podcaster edited Alex's seminar answer into a clip that made him sound like a scold. But there were victories, too. The veteran with the tremor enrolled in a conservative neurofeedback study and wrote a note that said simply, "I sleep now." A high school girl emailed Maya that she'd shifted from brain hacks videos to biology textbooks and wanted to be an electrophysiologist. A parent wrote to say her kid stopped crying at math when the teacher turned off harsh fluorescence and let the classroom be quiet. Sometimes civilization inches forward. Alex got worse before he got better. After the seminar, the adrenaline crash hit. The phantom hum grew loud again in the lonely hours. He tried to white-knuckle his way through it and failed. The world stayed a few decibels too bright, a few frames too fast. His right hand shook like a plucked wire. Finally, he let Maya drive him to a neurologist across town who didn't flinch at the word research and didn't reach for a prescription pad like a reflex. The doctor ordered scans, listened to the long version, and said, "You cooked some circuits. Not beyond repair, but you'll need to live like an athlete coming off an overtraining injury. Rest is not optional. Boredom is medicine." So Alex made boredom a practice. He walked without headphones. He sat on park benches and watched dogs lose their minds at squirrels. He cooked badly and burned less often. He practiced deliberately slow things: sourdough starter, scales on a cheap keyboard, the patient art of making coffee without turning it into rocket fuel. He let his brain be unremarkable on purpose. Recovery did not feel like victory. It felt like humility. But humility, he discovered, had a texture, soft, breathable, a fabric you could live inside. Maya checked on him daily without smothering. She brought him a library of novels. Not clever autofiction that would metastasize into essay in his head, but humane, unfashionable stories where people made dinners and got older and loved badly and loved better. She'd say 2 chapters, then a nap. And he would, and then text her a photo of a bowl of soup like a child showing a drawing to a parent. Sometimes he woke in the night with the old urge to go higher. He would sit up, sweating, and hold his own hand still until the urge passed. He kept the Helix drive in a safe deposit box with a letter taped to it. "If I ask for this without bringing Maya, say no." The banker, confused and compassionate, agreed. Weeks stretched into months. The tremor softened. The hum quieted. His thoughts reacquired corners. The world's volume settled around the level where music could be music again. He did not become who he was before. He was someone who had seen the cliff and kept a souvenir from the edge. But he was, again, someone who could look at a page of equations and not hear a choir. He was, again, someone who could listen to a friend and not translate their sadness into signal processing. The first day, he forgot about the Helix drive for an entire afternoon. He cried. Maya's paper cleared peer review in a journal that mattered more than most and far less than it wanted to. DeMarco launched the conservative trial and got boring results that were science's version of a warm blanket. Small improvements in working memory for some, better sleep for others, no fireworks, no catastrophes. He called a press conference to announce, not a revolution, but an incremental thing done carefully. The press mostly stayed home. That was fine. Wells kept his promise to do one podium and then slid back to the margins, a place he seemed to have made peace with. He and Alex met for coffee on a bench twice. They spoke little. They did not exchange numbers. Some friendships are tungsten filaments, thin, incandescent, brittle. On the anniversary of the seminar, Alex and Maya recorded a podcast episode for a show no one would call sexy. They didn't name Helix. They told the 10% story as if it was a fairy tale kids should grow out of. They told another story to grow into. How much of your brain do you use? Maya asked rhetorically into the microphone. All of it, Alex said. Just not all at once. You wouldn't flood a city to turn on a lamp. And if you could, the host asked. We'd still choose the lamp, Maya said. Because we want to see, not drown. They signed off. After, in the studio's tiny kitchen, they split an oatmeal cookie and argued amiably about whether raisins were a design flaw. Maya said, yes on principle. Alex, contrarian mostly to hear her laugh, said raisins were a test of character. Speaking of character, she said, eyebrow up, I was thinking we should start that scholarship. The one DeMarco keeps hinting at. For first-gen students in neuroscience. No essays about unlocking potential. Just questions about who they want to help. Alex grinned. And a clause that says they must sleep. 8 hours, Maya decreed. 9 during finals. They clinked paper cups like they were crystal. In his apartment that night, Alex wrote the last lines of the essay he'd been tinkering with since the day Wells first slid the silver drive across a library table. He kept it private. Not everything needed to be published. He wrote it to remind himself of the shape of the road. The myth offered me a crown and called it science. It promised that inside my skull was a locked palace, and that the right key would make me king. The truth gave me a lantern. It showed me rooms I already lived in but had not seen clearly. It asked me to arrange furniture, to open a window, to lower my voice so the other voices could be heard. The myth made me greedy. The truth made me grateful. I did not want all the lights on. I want the right ones. He closed the notebook. The room was dim, the good kind of dim. Enough light to read the spines on the shelf, enough shadow to feel like evening. He could hear the refrigerator hum, but it no longer shouted. The upstairs neighbor walked with mortal feet. He turned off the lamp and went to bed. In the dark, he did what all brains do when given mercy. He slept whole and partial, 10 and 100%, a chorus and a solo, the alternation and the sanity, the miracle and the guardrail. He slept, and the myth weakened by one more night. Outside, the city went on. Someone pulled a late shift. Someone finished a problem set. Someone read the op-ed and closed the tab and opened another. Headlines still howled. Vendors still hawked. Superheroes still leaped in pixels across screens. But in 1,000 small rooms, people dimmed lights and breathed and let the day end. They ran their extraordinary, ordinary organs at the pace of life. They used everything, not all at once. They learned to love that story. And somewhere, in a safe deposit box, a silver drive waited under a promise, quiet as a stone.